Greetings everyone, thank you for coming to my channel. This video is titled, should I use less or least? Also, when I say thank you for coming to my channel, I genuinely mean it because I really appreciate you guys and you guys really inspire me and motivate me to keep on going. When I first started making these videos, I had my doubts. I was like, oh my gosh, are people gonna watch these videos? Are they gonna be informative? So I really appreciate the people that have been continuously watching my videos and liking the videos, because that tells me that the videos are providing value in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to let you guys know that you're the best and you guys really inspire me and motivate me to just keep on going. So thank you. Okay, now let's get to the video. First, you need to know what an uncountable noun is. Uncountable nouns are nouns that can't be counted, like water, group, hair, band, food, music, and so on. So notice how all of these words are nouns and they can't be counted. For example, water. If I say, I'm drinking water, we can't count that. If I said there's a group of people, that's something that can't be counted because you know, or because you don't know how many people are in that group. If I was talking about my hair, we can't count how much hair we have. So that would be considered an uncountable noun. And band, you don't know how many people are in that band. So that would also be considered an uncountable noun. And the same thing goes for food and music. Those are nouns that can't be counted. Now, if I said I have 2 pieces of chicken, that's different because we're specifically talking about chicken. But when we're talking about food in general, food cannot be counted. And music also can't be counted. Less refers to a smaller amount or a smaller degree of something. Less is usually used with uncountable nouns. So our first example says, today I have less money in my bank account than I did yesterday. So this sentence is indicating that I have a smaller amount of money in my account today than I did yesterday. Our second example says, my schedule is busy, so I have less free time than I had before. So this sentence is indicating that I have a smaller amount of free time than I had before. And our last example says you need to argue less and listen more. So less is being used as an adverb in this sentence because it's modifying the verb argue. And this sentence is also indicating that there needs to be a smaller amount of arguing and more listening needs to happen. More or less means approximately or an estimate. So our first example says, after taxes, I make $40,000, more or less. So this sentence is basically saying I make about $40,000 after taxes. It's an estimate. Our second example says, I've been living in Texas for about 3 years, more or less. So this sentence is basically saying I've been living in Texas for about 3 years. If you ask me, more or less is kind of a waste of space, but English is kind of weird like that. Much less means something is less likely than something else. Our first example says, I don't like the rain, much less the snow. So this is basically another way of saying, I don't like the rain, but I really don't like the snow. Our second example says, I can't even afford a new phone, much less a new car. So this is basically another way of saying I can't afford a new phone, but I really can't afford a new car. Less and less means decreasing in amount or degree. So our first example says he had less and less interest in the boring presentation. So what this is pretty much saying is as the presentation went on, it was getting less and less interesting. Our next example says she had less and less patience for her annoying mother. So as the time went on, she started to get less and less patient with her mother. Least means the smallest amount or degree. Our first example says eating dinner was the least of my concerns. So in other words, out of all the things I was concerned about, eating dinner was at the very bottom of the list, the least of my concerns. Our second example says the least you can do is show some support. So if you're not going to do anything else, the least you can do is show some support. And our last example says, out of all of my friends, you text me the least. So all of my other friends text me every day, but you text me like once every 3 months. So that means you text me the least. Last but not least means last to be mentioned, but not last in order of importance. So example 1 says, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Lily. So Lily is the last to be introduced, but that doesn't mean she's last in order of importance. And our second example says, last but not least, I'd like to give a shout out to my best friend for always believing in me. So my best friend is the last to receive a shout out, but that doesn't mean she's last in order of importance. I don't know about you guys, but my best friend could never be last in order of importance because she is just the best. Okay, so to say the least means the reality is actually more serious or extreme than what was said. So our first example says her behavior was terrible, to say the least. So in other words, her behavior was terrible, but we're not going to go into detail about the things that she did. We're just going to keep it at her behavior was terrible, and that's to say the least. Our second example says, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, to say the least. So in other words, we're not going to go into detail about what I was seeing, but just know it was unbelievable. But we're just going to say I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and we're just going to keep it at that. At the very least means the lowest. So our first example says the experiment will take 2 years at the very least. So this kind of confused me at first, so I had to do some extra research. So I guess another way of explaining this would be, so say I tell somebody I'll be available in 3 hours at the very least. So that means I could possibly be available in 1 hour or in 2 hours, but 3 hours is just a safe estimate. Our second example says I will be graduating in 4 years at the very least. So I could graduate before 4 years, but 4 years is just a safe estimate. Not in the least means not at all. Our first example says I'm not in the least bothered by his comments. So in other words, I'm not bothered by his comments at all. Our second example says she's not in the least worried about the presentation. So in other words, she's not worried about the presentation at all. Thank you guys for coming. I hope you found this video informative. If you did find this video informative, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, or all of the above, and I'll see you next time.